In this video, I want to talk you through negotiating salaries, right? Because salaries at the end of the day, that's the most important discussion point when it comes to negotiating whether you want to stay at a company or not, right? Of course, there are other benefits, working from home, maybe additional kind of benefits in terms of work-life flexibility, but end of the day it comes down to how much money you're earning. So let's talk about some key tips to master your salary negotiations, to get raises, to negotiate some of those tough talks that you have to go through. So the thing is, when it comes to negotiation tactics for high income earners, it can be nuanced, it's slightly complex. It's not simply as asking for more money, right? And the truth is, at the end of the day, your salary matters, not necessarily the social status, like the job title. Because when you think beyond salary, job negotiation should focus on more than just compensation and benefits. When it comes to being a job seeker, you need to recognize the importance of securing tools and resources that are needed for the long-term success and job satisfaction. For example, whether your current company that you're working at can offer you a certain amount of money, or you need to really jump to another company. Are you a favorite of management, which will give you more leverage in terms of negotiating a higher salary? Could you make it one or two levels up, or does it look like you might be stuck forever at your current role and they might really delay the promotions process for you? Do you really need to leave for success and for a higher salary? These are all types of different considerations you should have. Do you want to leave a company now or wait a bit longer? You need to consider about your personal fulfillment and your future growth alongside the financial rewards. So the first key tip around salary negotiations is adapting to the organization type. And what I mean by that is adjusting your negotiation approach based on the organization structure. For example, large companies follow strict pay scales, right? They have pay bands, different levels of expertise and experience in terms of how you could be paid. So when it comes to following these strict pay scales, while startups offer more flexibility, some other companies, more larger corporations, that have very strict bans on what they can pay you. So you just understand that, you can be pushy to a certain extent, but, of course they might push back and say, well, we only have a certain amount of pay we can offer within certain pay bands and levels of experience. So this is the thing, you've got to be kind of flexible. And you can be flexible when it comes to startups and smaller companies, which will be less strict in terms of how much they can actually pay, and their revenue and their kind of budget for employees can vary. So that's the key point here, to start with adapting to company size, the organization structure, and specific pay scales. Point of advice number 2 is strategizing for large corporations, and that's understanding the market rate. For established firms, typically research the salary range for your particular role and build a case for earning at a top end of that range. And you can use leverage techniques such as things where you don't necessarily have a competing job offer. Just say, based on my research and my experience in this industry, typically these type of roles offer a certain amount, let's just say 90,000 to 100,000 USD, and that can guide discussions, just so you know what your actual leverage is based on the market. And speaking of leverage, you also have leverage of flexibility in certain startup roles where they may offer unique compensation arrangements, whether that's stock options, some kind of equity ownership in the company, custom benefits packages to reflect where you are in your life, whether it's benefits and discounts on childcare with local companies or local organizations that look after kids. So there's all sorts of leverages that you can really pursue depending on your circumstances. And that's why we've got that kind of headline excerpt here, startups versus big companies. There's all types of different approaches you can take to your career fit. Now, next up, we're going to focus on negotiating beyond salary. It could be skill development, it could be career growth opportunities. There's all sorts of different instances in terms of where you are in your career. You might not want to focus on the immediate benefit of how much money you can make today, but the long-term benefits of how much you can make by having the opportunity and the time to develop marketable skills, job satisfaction, and also your career growth opportunities. For example, sometimes, to develop the higher income skills, you need time. And many people are busy with their day job. They just don't have the time to kind of put together, for example, to learn a new coding language that can be maybe the next most popular coding language. Say you want to go into Web3, you want to learn Solidity, which is a popular coding language in relation to cryptocurrency. You might need the extra time to do that. So if you're going into a job and it's not really offering best benefits in terms of time, in terms of money, then you can maybe negotiate, say, I want some extra time, or to leave work on slightly early on 2 days so I can develop my skills. That might be some negotiation you can gain, right? Not just spending time with family, but developing those skills through maybe not leveraging extra money, but leveraging extra time. Now, next up, we want to talk about defining your priorities. Now, when it comes to defining your priorities, you want to align your priorities with where your life is right now. So it could be, having more social status by having a fancier job title if that's what you're chasing, or it could be having more work-life balance, more enjoyment, more time to develop your expertise by balancing your market research with your personal introspection. So it can't just be, say, focused on your salary, but you need to be thinking carefully where you are now, where you want to be 3-5 years from now too. And this brings us on to point 2, is your long-term strategy. You have to view your job, and each job these days is not about long-term stability at one company, but each job is a stepping stone and a platform to build your skills, right? So you approach your current role like, okay, I'll probably be there, depending on the circumstances, for 2, 3, or 5 years, then I'll take my next step. And it's very difficult in this type of unstable economy to be able to plan ahead too much because of layoffs, because of all types of crazy behavior you have to deal with in the office, which I'll cover in my other videos. You can just have a general idea of where you want to go without being too tied down to it. Like, it's definitely going to happen. Things could change. You might have a wonderful, excellent opportunity that you wouldn't have be able to predict, or things could end up worse than you could potentially imagine, and then you have to pivot and find a way to work. But as long as you've got a general idea and see each job as a stepping stone, not something you're committed to for the rest of your life. So approach your current role as a platform to build your skills, expertise, and if needed, your connections and networking for your potential future career move if you want to make a pivot from one department to the other or one particular team to the other. Next up, you need to negotiate for growth tools. And what this could be, seeking resources, training, support staff, or a relevant title to enhance your development and align with future goals. So for example, if you want the company to fund your professional qualifications, that would be a good thing. Some people want to make a shift between maybe working in an operations, finance support role to becoming a certified financial planner. And in that case, you might be working for a top bank and they say, well, we'll pay for your professional qualification, we'll give you some extra time to study, and also as long as you stay at the company for a couple of years after completing that certification, we'll pay it off and won't ask for you to pay it back to us. So as long as you need to check the small print around those type of things, because some companies, they say, yeah, we'll pay for your professional qualification, but there's some small print and some policy handbook that if you leave the company within the year, after completing the qualification, you have to pay them back. So bear in mind about that. Make sure you're paying attention to the resources that they offer. Maybe negotiate that as part of your salary negotiations, that they'll offer a certain amount of their company training budget for employees to give you additional time to develop skills. Next thing is around mutually beneficial agreements. Now, when it comes to employers, they often value investments that benefit both you and the company, right? So you need to think about that. So for example, if you're going to attend industry conferences, continuing education, they probably don't mind those things because typically they have a budget for training employees, and those things are not too expensive depending on what it would be. But if you're going to attend an industry conference and then you're going to come back to the company, maybe do a presentation, a lunch and learn, a teaching session for the other team members, they might not mind spending some of the company budget to do that for you, because in the end of the day, it's not the manager's money, it's a vague department budget that they typically have a lot of money for. They just don't discuss it, and they don't mind giving you a couple extra $100 to do certain kind of industry events that you want to attend, because it's going to benefit you, benefit your profile in the industry, and give you some leverage to kind of teach others in the company, right? Leveraging tax advantage opportunities. Now, when it comes to employer-funded tuition or training programs, these can be more cost-effective for both parties rather than out-of-the-pocket expenses. So I know, for example, some professional qualifications around executive career development. Many companies that offer these kind of small niche training companies for senior management, what they do is they offer one price if you want to pay for it individually. But if your company's going to pay for it, they offer another price, like a kind of discount company price, because it gives them the leverage of building that relationship with a major corporation. So there are instances where there are tax advantages, where there are other discounts that can occur depending on the professional qualification. So sometimes companies can also write off certain things as a expense. So there's all sorts of different nuances there. So you'd be surprised how much you can pursue professional qualifications without paying for it, and the company you work for paying for it instead. Next thing is around tailoring your time horizon. We all want to make as much of a jump to a higher salary as quick as possible, but sometimes you need to plan ahead, right? It takes a few stages in your career to get to maybe the salary you want. You should focus on comparing your short-term goals, 1 to 2 years, versus the 3 to 5 year goals, right? Because things can change. Like I say, management changes, you're doing so great in a role, getting promoted quite quickly, the manager changes, the new manager doesn't like you, he wants to replace you with a junior contact who's his friend. All of a sudden your kind of career is put in jeopardy. So these are the type of scenarios you need to think through. Next up, I want to talk about being happy in a job and whether a happy job and a happy life is a thing. There's a popular phrase, happy wife, happy life, but I think a more accurate description in this society is if you have a happy job, or at least fulfilling to a certain extent, you could have a happy life because you spend so much time around work. Now, prioritizing job satisfaction over time. See, early in your career, it's easy to make a trade-off, right, for growth and experience, right? But later, you might want to focus on roles that align with long-term happiness. When you're more junior, you might not mind being overworked to get the experience or the big name companies on your CV. And then later on, you want a bit more work-life balance, a bit more long-term happiness and freedom. So you want to work at a slightly slower pace, maybe at a smaller firm. So these are the type of things you need to think about. When it comes to the headline, the first headline on your screen, remote work's rise, trends, engagement, and workplace dynamics in a post-pandemic era. This is the type of things you need to consider, right? You might want to take a step back in your career to have more remote work and better work-life balance. Next up, we need to think about understanding job responsibilities, right? So these are the things around what does the day-to-day job actually involve, right? Because if you're going to be working and you're just starting a new company, you need to think about how stressful it can be or how complex it could be. So for example, when you join a company and you agree a salary, whatever that would be, it's likely you won't get a salary rise or a major salary rise, at least for a couple of years in that job. So you need to think carefully about what is the day-to-day role actually going to involve. So you need to learn that through the negotiation process. You're not just a vague job description, your discussions through the interviews, try to really read in between the lines what you'd be doing in terms of daily tasks, the team dynamics. Are you senior or junior in that role? Could you get lots of work dumped on you from other teams or other team members? What is the reporting structure? You're reporting to someone senior. There are many layers of management between you and the real decision makers. Think about your specific preference and skills. Do you prefer to work alone, and then the work tasks are aligned with that type of personality? Do you prefer teamwork, and then you find out the work tasks are more in that type of range? So you need to think carefully about what is the team dynamics, management dynamics, and how it actually works on a day-to-day basis, not just a grey, bland, random description and corporate wording that they put in the job descriptions. You need to think through it carefully. Next thing, you need to negotiate for the right fit, because advocating for your kind of adjustments to your role to focus on the tasks that you enjoy, and be wary of employees or employers, companies that don't accommodate to small kind of changes that benefit you. So in terms of negotiating for the right fit, your strengths and abilities might be working in quieter environments compared to in noisy environments. So for example, I've worked on the trading floor at major investment banks, and it's an open plan office, right? It can be quite noisy. And sometimes I've had management that have been quite difficult with me when I'm doing a task I need to focus on. They wouldn't let me go to an office, like a quiet office, where we have plenty of extra quiet office spaces, in closed rooms where you could just focus and do some detailed analysis. They refuse to do that sometimes, and it's like completely unnecessary. If you're not letting your employees work in a way that's most effective to get the work done, then it really does reflect poorly on management. So that's why you should think about companies that don't give you reasonable adjustments. And in the UK in particular, and I'm sure it's in the US and elsewhere, there's certain leverage you have to negotiate for reasonable adjustments. That's a key phrase to bear in mind if you have to use this type of negotiation tactic. Reasonable adjustment could be that if you're a working mother, that 2 days a week you need to arrive at work late to drop off your kids at school. A reasonable adjustment is you're doing a work task that takes a lot of concentration and you need to be in a quiet room doing that rather than sitting on a busy office floor. Maybe you can do it working from home. There's all types of different reasonable adjustments you can ask for. Next up is Gen Z reporting lower job satisfaction and higher burnout rate than other group. This is a little headline I wanted to include here because people are quite frustrated, right? People are struggling not just in terms of the economy. People are struggling also in terms of socially, not having much to work for. They might be struggling to either buy a house or have a family, things like that. So many people are having burnout at work, right? And the workplace environment these days, it doesn't seem to understand that, of course, there's differences between the generations, their working styles. I would say Gen Z Generally speaking, they might prefer more to work alone in quiet environments. There has to be some flexibility there, and the workplace has to adjust, otherwise it's going to keep alienating people to the point where we see society right now where there's a bit of social instability, right? Encouraging candid feedback, right? So you should ask interviewers about any concerns regarding qualifications to identify potential job adjustments or fit issues early. And what that means is there's two ways I mean this, right? Look out for red flags in terms of companies that seem too rigid and not that flexible, and maybe they're difficult with other co-workers. You might be able to pick up on that in early signs of general discussions you have. But other things I want you to kind of look out for is if there's anything they might point out on your CV, your resume, or your skill level that will give them more power to negotiate a lower salary for you. And what I mean by that is experience in, let's just say, trading commodities, but you haven't been doing it for as long as they might have expected, but they want to hire you, right? But they'll say, oh, you've only had 1 year experience working commodities hiring. If you had more experience, then we might be able to offer you a bigger salary. But at the end of the day, they want to hire you. So it's a bit like you have to kind of weigh up the two and just say, well, I have 1 year experience in commodities trading, but I studied it quite thoroughly, perhaps as part of a professional qualification, or also maybe trading similar products like equities, so you can have transferable skills there. So try to strengthen your negotiating power by preempting this, by kind of speaking up ahead before they have a chance to point holes in your experience when they kind of want to hire you anyway. Also evaluate the workplace politics, and that can be difficult when you're maybe interviewing for a new job and negotiating salaries. But if you're already a company pivoting to another team, you really need to think about what's going on, what's the work culture like, or the woke agenda culture, how's that operating. Investigate the organizational environment, right, and think about what was, and one thing I always ask is, who previously did this role, or is it a brand new role? And you can really gauge in between the lines by talking to different employees in the office, maybe after you start the role, what was their real role? Not what they say on paper in a job description, what were they actually doing, what the real workplace dynamics were, why they moved on from that role to another. It really gives you some really hidden context that's typically not spoken of. This will help you stop you from stepping into a really toxic work environment, really unstable position that can really make you unhappy over the long term because you didn't see certain red flags early on enough. Next thing is around senior executive role negotiation, right? I want you to focus on your long-term goals, financial stability versus a quick salary raise. Lots of people just want a quick salary raise. They just want it to essentially get a quick pay rise now so they can maybe buy something that they want, rather than think about long-term success. Sometimes a slower rise, and obviously I'm not saying you should accept too low salaries or you should devalue yourself, but sometimes it's about playing the long game. Sometimes it is better to accept a slightly lower salary at a major company, because having that major company on your resume will help your negotiating power later down the line when you're negotiating top roles, right? So prioritize your long-term success and financial stability over the immediate salary negotiation, salary increase that you're looking for. In certain cases, you might want to take a strategic approach. If you're an executive, you might want to forego kind of salary increases and focus on maybe tools or the power that you might want to have some kind of organizational power for future success. And what I mean by that is, if you're more senior and you might think, okay, well, if I take a small step up, I'll be able to manage a bigger department, even if I'm not getting a similar raise in my salary. If I'm go from managing 50 people to managing 80 people over the long term, that's going to give me a bigger platform to maybe make to the C-suite board of directors level, maybe to have more wins in the department through growing the department, through managing certain effective and important company projects, which will give you more leverage later on through being strategic for bigger salary negotiations. And the other thing is about paying attention to the broader environment around you, like thinking about the visionary leadership. And what I mean by that, it could be a CEO is going to restructure the broader business. Will this give you more or less power? Is the CEO cutting your department, cutting another department, thinking you might want to be managing 2 teams instead of 1? Will that give you more power or less power? So there's all types of changing dynamics are always occurring, right? You might think, you're managing a small team of 5 people, you're going nowhere, and next thing the management plans on firing some other management that are at the parallel level as you, and then all of a sudden they put you in charge of managing 2 or 3 teams. So think about these restructuring dynamics and how that could impact you. Next up, it was around the proven results, right? What big wins can you achieve in your career over the next 1 to 3 years? And will this allow you to take a massive step up in the company you're at or moving to another company? Because lots of times I know it can be a bit boring sometimes, day-to-day work, or you're stuck in the trenches, you're not really going anywhere. But if you have 1 to 3 big wins each year, 1 to 3 big projects for over 3 years, and maybe that's 9 to 10 key pieces of work you've done, key goals you've achieved, this will allow you to take a massive step up in the organization. For example, that could maybe help you get promoted to a senior level, or it'll give you enough experience to put on your CV. And if you frame it the right way, when you're moving to another company, it's like, oh, you've achieved all these big goals at a company, you can do the same for them. And lastly and finally, we want to talk about future benefits, right? The CEO and particularly senior people, right? They might be thinking about where their contract is right now, what is the long-term vision. And lots of people are not thinking about the long-term vision, they're thinking about a short-term goal. And that's why I'd encourage you to kind of be the CEO of your own business or your own personal brand, personal professional brand, in the sense of being able to kind of yield a longer term benefits, to manage yourself like you're managing a business. And lots of people, they kind of don't do that. They just want to think about how they can make a quick buck right now. But the long term play is what really the game you're playing. So I hope I helped give you a quick speed run on mastering salary negotiations to get salary raises at your current company and go through tough talks when it comes to working with a lot of the other job offers that you may be receiving. I've worked in the finance industry for over a decade, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, many other top companies. I offer career advice, link in description if you want to speak with me directly. I'll be happy to help you and help you navigate this type of weird and wacky world of salary negotiations. Let me know in the comments how you deal with some of these scenarios yourself. I'll be happy to respond to some of them. And there are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now. I'll see you next time.